Good evening, friends, and welcome to another episode of Wayback Wednesday. I'm Randy Adcox. Glad you could be with us tonight. If you remember from last week's show, I had made it out to Air Care last week and picked up some pictures. JB and his son Rusty were kind enough to scrounge up some pictures and old photographs they had collected over the years, and some had been hanging on the wall out there. And so they were very gracious and generous to allow me to come get the pictures, take them back to my office, scan them and save them. Some of them were in picture frames that had not been opened in literally 50 years. I was kind of amused at some of the links that whoever originally framed these photographs went to. There was literally on some of them a piece of like a brown paper bag paper type material on the back of the back of the frame that was glued to the frame. And of course, had to cut through that, open that up, and then there were little, if you remember, the old metal inserts that went all the way around the inside of the picture frame on the back side to keep everything in. Those things can be a chore to get in and get out, so I had to take those out. Anyway, long story short, I managed to get, I don't know, a couple dozen or so pictures. There was actually more than that in the collection, and some of them were duplicates and some of them we just couldn't identify. We weren't able to identify everybody in every one of these pictures, but there were some really neat ones here. And so I thought I would share those with you tonight. Before we get into that, though, I just want to do a special thank you to JB and Rusty especially. I had a really nice visit today with JB. We talked about, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes, not a long time, but we talked about days gone by and his entry into the field of aviation and the many jobs he had over the years and many types of aircraft he flew. It was really interesting to me to learn how he got involved in flying. And for those that don't know, J.B. Williams' family ran the Williams Foods down the corner of Grand Avenue. It's Grand Avenue across the tracks. I guess on this side it's still Gray Street and Church Street. Excuse me, that little grocery store there on the corner, Williams Foods. That was J.B.'s family's business. And so if you think about the proximity of that business to the old Rocky Mountain Municipal Airport, a little further north on Church Street, JB said it was fairly easy for him to sneak away from his father's business and sneak down to the airport down there when he was a teenager and supposed to be working for his dad, and would go down there and do odd jobs at the airport down there just to be around aircraft and be around the environment. And another interesting thing he told me was that he flew several different types of aircraft and got his license fairly early in life and never paid to learn how to fly. It was all traded out, if you will. He said he would do anything that he had to do, from sweeping the floors to moving airplanes, fueling airplanes, washing airplanes, anything that he could do to spend time there around the airport and build up some brownie points, if you will. And he parlayed those eventually into a pilot's license. So it was just neat to hear him tell how he migrated through. He spent some time in the military. I didn't know that. He was drafted during the Korean War, went to Germany, by that time he had already been a pilot and had actually was asked by the Army to become a helicopter pilot. And he said he declined that offer. He didn't want to fly helicopters. But anyway, it was just a really, really neat time to spend with JB and talk to him. As I said before, I used to work for him. I worked at Air Care, God, it's been over 30 years ago now. And and then of course I left many years ago. And since then I've been back many, many times. I do their computer work out there and take care of the computers on site. And so it's just been really nice to develop this working relationship with JB and everyone out there. Of course, JB has recently sold the business now. Mike Bass has Air Care now and is running the operations out there. But JB still maintains an office out there and goes out there every day. Another thing I learned today I didn't realize, JB Williams is 94 years old. I knew he was in his early 90s. I would have thought 91, 92 maybe, but he told me today, and it's no secret. He would gladly tell anyone what I'm telling you now. He's 94 years old. Still got a mind like a steel trap, still very sharp. Still got a head full of hair, got more than I got, in fact. But anyway, it was a real pleasure to spend some time with him and learn, as I said, his entry into aviation and how he went through the various jobs throughout his career. Also had a nice little visit last week with Bill Dove, another one of my customers, and he gave me a postcard. We'll get to that later on the show tonight. It was a very old postcard dating back, I'm guessing, the 1930s, maybe 40s, of a prominent home in Rocky Mount. I'll leave it at that. We'll see the postcard a little bit later on in the show. That being said, I'll tell you what, Lee, let's go ahead and jump right into this. These pictures, by the way, are in no particular order. I tried to kind of list them chronologically, but frankly, a lot of them didn't have any dates assigned to them. And so I kind of had to look at the vehicles in the pictures and the people and the clothes they were wearing and the styles and fashions, and kind of had to kind of guess roughly when they were. Some were able to identify by various means, and I'll tell you what I mean by that in a few moments. But anyway, this first one we know is from 1956 because it actually says in the caption down there, and this was a reprinted picture. I actually went back and tried to find the original, but this picture appeared sometime later, and the caption reads, "Happy times. Apparently all was going well at the old Rocky Mount Airport on North Church Street in 1956 when this picture was made by photographer Charlie Killebrew. Pictured standing before a staggered wing beach powered by a 450 horsepower radial engine are from left to right, Foy Pullen, we talked about him a couple weeks ago, Charlie Brown, L.P. Broadfield, the tall man, Fred Shorty Scherer, the little guy in the front there. There's an unidentified guy, and then John Ruff and M.M. Roddy. Broadfield managed the local airport for a number of years before moving to Florida. He is now deceased. I'm not sure when this print, if you will, appeared in the paper, but the picture itself was from 1956. And so anyway, probably all of these folks in this picture now, of course, passed away. JB is not in this picture, obviously, but I would venture to say that probably every one of these folks has now passed on. All right, let's move on to item number 2. This is a picture that JB and I spent a few minutes talking about today because there were some things that I had forgotten or never knew about, frankly. The building behind the airplane there, the little brick building, was actually, it served 2 or 3 purposes. Of course, behind that is the hangar, the big hangar there where they would put the airplanes in and do maintenance and so forth. But that little brick building, on one end of it, was the Federal Aviation Agency. And then there was also, before Piedmont Airlines started flying in and out of Rocky Mount Airport, Capital Airlines was the carrier, if you will, in this area. And so that door you see there, just to the left of the airplane in the picture, above the door you see that little square or rectangle shape there. That's a sign that says Capital. It's got a little airplane wing logo there. And then, of course, the back part, the far left of the building that's off the picture there, was used by the administrative offices of the Rocky Mount Airport. And so I didn't really remember this building. I'm sure it was there when I was a kid, obviously, but I just didn't remember it. And so we spent a fair amount of time talking about the day, and over the years it served various purposes. But anyway, this is probably from the early 1960s, I would say. Maybe 63, 64, somewhere along in there. All right, let's move on then. Item number 3. There was a few, in fact, aerial photographs in this collection. And this was the only one that I could immediately recognize. And I'll give you a second to get your bearings, kind of see if you can figure out where this is too. There was 2 or 3 other aerial photographs that JB and I both spent a considerable amount of time today looking at, and we just could not figure out where they were. And so I did not include them tonight. But this picture, if you haven't figured it out already, is looking roughly west on Sunset Avenue. That's the city lake there in the foreground. You see on the upper left-hand corner, there's the Tar River there. Those round objects, those water tanks there, right there beside the city lake, and of course across Sunset Avenue from them is a water treatment plant. And you can see Thomas Street coming in on about midway to the screen on the right-hand side, coming in to Sunset Avenue right there. And for those that remember, right there where Sunset and Thomas came together was a Texaco station run by a man named Tootsie Cancel. Tootsie Cancel's Texaco was right there in that little area right there. So this was one of the, like I said, of the 3, 4, maybe 5 aerial photographs that were in the collection. This was the only one. And of course the power plant, I forgot to mention the power plant right there to the extreme left-hand side, about middle way. But this was the only one of the aerial photographs I was able to immediately recognize as being the City Lake, Sunset Avenue, Tar River, and Thomas Street, and so forth. So anyway, okay, Lee, let's move on. In 1961, and I didn't realize the effort had started this early. In fact, truth be told, it started back in the late 50s. There were discussions about two cities, Rocky Mount and Wilson, joining forces and having an airport that both cities could use. This article appeared in Rocky Mount Telegram September 14, 1961. And as you can see, the headline reads, "Two cities remain apart in effort to secure joint airport operation." There was a few squabbling points. Number one, neither one of the cities wanted to pay for a facility that was, closer to the other city. So finding an ideal midway point, if you will, between the city of Rocky Mount and the city of Wilson was in itself a task. And so there was a lot of discussions that went on for several years, in fact. Like I said, this was 1961, and at this point, I'll read this caption here. It says, "Discuss airports." These three members of the Rocky Mount and Wilson Airport Commissions are shown here talking in a jovial manner about a problem they discussed seriously earlier in the evening at a joint meeting of Rocky Mount and Wilson JCs. WB Billy Harrison, by the way, that's the same Billy Harrison that the local Harrison family YWCA is named after. We've had a couple shows about Billy Harrison in the past. That's him on the left. Revis Nelson on the right, who's a member of the Rocky Mount Commission, and then Lem Gibbons, who is chairman of the Wilson Airport Advisory Committee. They explore for the Young Men Civic Group's possibilities of a joint airport between the two cities. The meeting was at the Rio Restaurant. We've talked about the Rio Restaurant many times here on the show. But anyway, this, as I said, it was in 1961. There was ongoing discussions about putting together an airport that would serve both Rocky Mount and Wilson. And at least at this point in the process, they were still fairly good ways apart on coming to terms about what it should entail and who should be footing the finances, so to speak, and so forth. So anyway, let's move on, Lee. Item number 5, December the 2nd, 1962. This picture appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram. And, as a small child, I remember going out to the airport, particularly on Sunday afternoons, and sitting and watching the planes take off and land. The old DC-3s were one that I remember quite fondly, as well as the small Piper Cubs and so forth. And so when I saw this picture, I thought, well, these are mighty big airplanes that were landing out there in 1962. The caption says, "Rocky Mount's airport had two big visitors Friday, private corporate airplanes. In staff photographer Charlie Kibler's pictures, airport visitors inspect the J.P. Stevens and Company Gulfstream 2-engine aircraft. The Wall Street Journal owns the plane to the left. It is identical to the Stevens plane. Cost of each is about $1.25 million. In 1962, a $1.25 million airplane was a whole lot of money and a very expensive airplane for sure. It says interiors are arranged as train lounge cars or elongated dens. Conversation areas of tables and chairs. Stevens officials flew into Rocky Mount and hopped a smaller plane to Roanoke Rapids to the Stevens Mill. The newspaper's plane brought editor Vermont Royster to Rocky Mount to meet his sister, Mrs. James R. Trotter. She returned to New York with him. The Stevens plane was in town from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. The Journal plane was here from 2 to 4 p.m. So kind of odd that two very large planes, much larger than what would typically take off or land from that airport, were here at the same time on the same day. 1962, December 2nd, 1962. Okay, Lee. Item number 6. Charlie Brown was probably one of the best. He was aircraft mechanics that I'd ever known. He and Foy Pullen were good friends. They worked together. Charlie was one of those mechanics that could listen to an airplane engine run and tell you what was wrong with it, or in fact, if there was nothing wrong with it. But I do remember working with Charlie when I got out of the Navy and went to work out here at the airport. Charlie Brown was there then, and a heck of a nice guy. And I got a chuckle looking at some of these pictures. I will share one with you in a few minutes of Charlie from 1967. I'll leave it at that for now. I won't go into detail. But in 1967, Charlie changed his appearance quite drastically. Okay, Lee, let's move on. I mentioned Foy Brown, item number 7. This is a picture of Foy Brown. I think we've shown this exact same picture. I think it appeared in the Telegram, in fact, and I think we've shown this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the book that Foy Pullen wrote. And speaking of great mechanics and guys who did it all, before we pulled in. Certainly, we've talked about him. A couple of weeks ago, we spent some length of time talking about his accomplishments and what he did here locally in the aviation community. But as I said before, I'm ashamed to admit that I just cannot remember. I know that he had basically retired by the time that I worked out there, but I've also heard that he was still coming and going into the late 80s, early 90s out there on occasion. And so I'm sure our paths had to cross at some point, but I honestly just don't remember seeing him out there when I was out there. It's possible we never did cross paths, but I was there for, I don't know, maybe a year. And I'm just really surprised that I cannot remember meeting him, talking with him, having some interaction with him, because I did with everybody else out there. I mean, all the mechanics and the guys who worked on the flight line and the guys who worked in the park department in different places. But anyway, we'll move on, Lee. Let's go to item number 8. This is actually a picture that was taken sometime in the early 1960s. Perhaps as late as the late 1960s, actually. I'm not sure. This one did not have a date on it. And the gentleman in the middle, the tall guy holding a bucket there, JB could not remember his name. In fact, he couldn't remember the other two guys' names either. But the tall guy, he said, was something to do with the state agricultural commission or whatever, dealing with the chemicals used in crop dust. This is obviously a crop duster airplane behind him here. And so this guy was, I guess, there to ensure that the chemicals were legal in the right proper mix and so forth. And so anyway, if anybody recognizes the other two guys, the guy standing on the wing and the little shorter guy below, I'm not positive. I think the guy with the hat on, JB told me a story about a pilot that was a crop duster pilot. And one day he was flying too low over field somewhere and happened to clip some kind of line, whether it was a telephone line, power line, I don't know for sure. I'm not sure anyone knew. But anyway, he caught it, and it was wrapped around his landing gear, I guess. And so he flew around for a while, tried to shake it loose and could not, and ended up, whatever field he was in was some distance away. I mean, it was in the area, but not out there at the airport. But anyway, he had to end up flying out there to the Rocky Mount Wilson Airport, I guess it was at that time, because this would have been a little bit. No, I take that back. I believe it was, though. I believe JB said one thing he told me today was that when the airport itself moved from the North Church Street location to out the Rocky Mount Wilson Airport where it is now, the city owned the airport property, and they allowed the crop dusting operation to continue for a while out there. The Rocky Mount Wilson Airport Authority did not want to deal with the crop dusting equipment, chemicals, and so forth associated with the crop dusting industry. So they kind of, I guess, were down on the crop dusting coming out there to the new airport. And so the city of Rocky Mount allowed them to continue using the old airfield out there to crop dust. And so the story was that JB would tell me was that this guy was flying too low, got hung up in some kind of cable or wire or whatever, and couldn't land out there for whatever reason, and ended up coming out to the new airport and landing out there to get the cable, whatever it was, untangled from his aircraft. So anyway, and I just realized we blew right past our first commercial break. So Lee, let's go ahead and bring it back to me. We'll take that commercial break now. When we come back, we're going to show you some more pictures, talk a little bit more about the history of the airport around Rocky Mount and some of the folks who were involved with that. So, Lee, go ahead and take it to a commercial break. When we come right back, folks, we'll show you some more pictures and talk some more about the airport. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
gardening and landscaping needs. All you need is your imagination, and Harper's Garden and Stone Center can supply the materials to make the job the success you want it to be. We have flowers, plants, trees, decorative stones, slate or flagstone. Enjoy the nice spring weather with Pawleys Island Furniture and our Wilmington Grills. We now offer select hard-to-find fishing tackle for the avid fisherman. Also visit Wendy's Hole in the Wall Boutique and shop for the whole family. Shoes, Vera Bradley bags, and Simply Southern apparel. Harper's Garden and Stone Center, located at 2145 Oak Level Road, open Monday through Saturday, rain or shine.
Family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need, and we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service, we offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family, and we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
If you or your loved one is living with hearing loss, and if you haven't found a solution that fits your lifestyle, then you should consult with the local experts at the new Hearing Aid Urgent Care in Nashville, North Carolina. Hearing Aid Urgent Care is a place to go for over-the-counter hearing solutions that will improve your daily life and communication between your loved ones and you. Purchasing in our store does not require any prescription or medical recommendation. Our team of experts does recommend a hearing examination so we can help you purchase the correct product for your personal needs. We hold regular listen and learn events so you can ask questions and work with the high-quality products from our vendors to find out what hearing device will best suit you before you buy. Open Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And you can call 252-459-4008 to find out more information. Hearing Aid Urgent Care located at 102 West Nashville Drive in Nashville, North Carolina.
When faced with special care needs for elderly or disabled loved ones, families want compassionate, comforting care. That's Tender Touch Home Care Services' goal, providing the level of care we would expect for our own. With over 10 years of home care excellence, Tender Touch provides an array of services that keeps your loved one at home. From personal care, light housekeeping, errands, and meal preparation, to our private duty care program, which combines all of our home care offerings in one package.
Tender Touch Home Care Services, where your needs are our concern.
We're in our 18th year of practice at the Hammer Chiropractic Center, and we've seen over 15,000 different people in the Rocky Mount area. 40% of headaches actually come from a neck problem. Many patients come in taking multiple aspirin, over-the-counter medications and such a day, and we can get you to stop doing that and actually fix the problem so the headaches don't rise anymore. A lot of people think chiropractic hurts. It does not. Most of the people come in and they feel great when they leave.
And we're back. During the break, I got a phone call, or a text. I got a text from Rusty Williams, and he was giving me a little more information about some of these people in this last picture. Lee, go back to item number 8 if we could. It says that the guy standing up on the wing of the aircraft up at the very top left-hand corner of the picture there is George Fell, who was a pilot out there. And then the little guy standing on the ground down there beside the taller guy holding the bucket, the little guy's Eddie Bullard. And he said that Eddie used to run a store, a little grocery store out at Little Eastonburg there at Sunset in Halifax. So some of you may remember him, may know him. And I asked him, I sent her a text back and asked, was he related to Al Bullard? Many of you know Al. And he said he wasn't sure. He thought they might be related. Apparently, Eddie passed away some years ago. So I know sometimes Al watches the show. So Al, if Eddie Bullard was any kin to you, let me know. By the way, I didn't put the number yet. 407-1111 is our number, 407-1111. But anyway, we're going to go through the rest of these pictures, and Love to hear from anybody who's got any memories about any of these people. If you have a memory about going to the airport and watching the planes come in and land, maybe going there on a Sunday afternoon, getting a milkshake and a hot dog or a hamburger. It used to be a frequent gathering place for a lot of people. I know my family went there several times and on Sunday afternoon to watch planes take off and land. Okay, let's move on in, Lee. Item number 9. This picture was not dated. It was not identified in any manner, but it was two things I knew immediately. Number one, it was Charlie Killebrew in the center there. I recognized Charlie, and of course, J.B. Williams on the left. The guy on the right threw me for a minute until I looked at his eyes and said, I know who that is. That's Charlie Brown. And so then I also know this picture had to be made in 1967, and sure enough, J.B. confirmed that today. J.B. on the left, Charlie Killebrew in the middle, Charlie Brown on the right. And this was during the Centennial, Rocky Mountain Centennial celebration in 1967, where a lot of the men grew beards and or mustaches. And Charlie Brown grew a right impressive beard there, I must say. I'd never seen Charlie in a beard, never knew he ever had a beard. He certainly didn't have one when I worked with him at the airport out there. But in this picture, he had one, I guess, for at least the duration of the Centennial celebration here in Rocky Mount. But 1967, so this would have been out at the old airport on Church Street, because by this time, of course, the new airport had not opened up yet. So, okay, let's move on then. Item number 10. This picture was the only picture in the whole lot that actually had anything written on the back. And on the back of this picture, it just had J.D. Winston. And so Rusty just sent me another text and said that former picture was actually taken out there. It was when it was first being built. So I guess it was 1967. I guess they had apparently got enough out there that it was, I guess, a grassland or whatever. But in any case, but yeah, this picture here, on the back of the picture, it had J.D. Winston written on it. No picture, no date, so I'm guessing it was sometime in the 1960s. But this is the same building, by the way, we were talking about earlier, that at one time housed the Federal Aviation Agency here locally, as well as the terminal operations for both Capital Airlines and later Piedmont Airlines. And of course, the Broadfield fellow who run the airport for many years had part of it also. So 3 or 4 different entities were in the building over a period of time. But that's J.D. Winston right there. We talked about J.D. many times. He ran an auto parts store down on Washington Street for a number of years. He himself was an aviator, avid pilot, and flew quite a bit actually around Rocky Mountain for many, many years. Okay, Lee, let's move on then. Item number 10. Couple things about this picture that kind of jumped out at me, maybe will you too. Number one, in the foreground, of course, there's another crop duster there. And you see the air care sign above the little concrete block building there. And then in the background, you see Hardee's back there. And, I remember when Hardee's looked like this. Of course, it doesn't look that way anymore. And if it doesn't look quite right to you, if something looks a little off, we'll get to that in a minute. But your intuition is right. There's something different about that building now. It does not look anything like that, number one, but we'll talk a little bit more in a little bit about what's changed in that building since this picture was made probably sometime in the mid to late 60s. This one didn't have a date on it either, so we're not exactly sure about what time frame this was. Hardee's built that building in, I think it was 1968, so this was sometime between 1968 and 1970, maybe somewhere along in there. But anyway, we'll show you some more pictures a little bit later on that'll kind of clarify some of this that might not look quite right to you now. Speaking of Hardee's, item number 12, Lee, it was March the 7th, 1968, in fact, that this article appeared in the Rocky Mountain Telegram, and the headline reads, "Feeling of Pride Noted During Hardee's Open House." And it's a fairly long article. I'm not going to try to read it. I will read the caption on 2 pictures above, and they're a little bit dark and grainy. I apologize. But I found this picture when I was actually looking for some information about the previous picture I just showed you. And this caption reads, "Mayor John Menges on the left," and picture has some first-hand information concerning a model of Hardee's establishment from President Leonard Rawls. There's 2 names I hadn't heard in a long time. How about that? John Menges and Leonard Rawls. During Hardee's open house session Wednesday. Photo at the right shows a hamburger in the making. And this picture is a hydro flaker, it looks like, at rear left and a grinder, and near right or deposit where it deposits meat into a patty making unit. I remember my father worked out at Hardee's for a while, and he worked back in the area where this equipment was, in fact. And I remember I had opportunity to go out there and see this machine run, making hamburger patties and so forth. It was really neat to see that ran. But anyway, this was the grand opening of the Hardee's corporate operations here in Rocky Mount, March 7, 1968. And it's interesting that Hardee's had a plane for a number of years and kept it, hanging at the airport out there. And then when the airport moved to the new location, the plane went out there too. And so I understand Hardee's, I think at one time either owned the land where the airport was or leased it or something, and it had some control over the land where the old airport was anyway. I think there was even plans to build out there. And if you remember, there was a lot of hoopla about chemicals in the ground, and there was everything from JB told me today, in fact, there was a period of time where the city had stored, I think, some transformers, and they had possibly leaked oil or whatever the fluid is inside a transformer. It's some kind of oil, I'm sure. And then, of course, there was concern that some of the pesticides that were used during the crop dusting had leaked in the ground out there, and so there was a big stink, and there were some lawsuits. I think JB told me today he got sued. I'm not sure how all that shook out over time. But in any case, it was just, there was a big stink about the land. In fact, it was really ironic that of all the stink, and I use that term loosely, of all the stink that came about because of the chemical elements in the ground out there, it's really bizarre that they would eventually turn around and make a park out there, where kids would play ball and so forth. So I guess it was deemed in later years to be safe for such activities, but there was a big stink for a long time about the chemicals in the ground out there. Okay, let's move on, Lee. Item number 13. I mentioned earlier that little brick building had once been the office for the Federal Aviation Agency office, and this was a little plaque that appeared. When I first looked at this picture, I thought I was looking at a sign that was beneath two windows, and it was only after looking at another picture, another image, that I realized that what I'm looking at here, or what we're looking at, is actually we're standing on the ground looking up at a building, and that's actually a chimney right there on the upper right-hand side of that Federal Aviation Agency plaque. That's a chimney going straight up, and the blue you see is actually the sky. So someone was standing on the ground with a camera aimed up at near the top of the building, that took that picture. And so what you're seeing there is the sign and the chimney, and as I said, the blue sky in the background there in the upper portion of the picture. This was sometime in the 1960s also. And of course, when the airport moved from the Rocky Mount, Church Street location out to the Rocky Mount Wilson location, the FAA building and operation, I should say, not building, but the operation moves as well out there, and it's out there now, in fact. Okay, moving on, Lee, item number 14. We're fairly certain that this was another crop duster, and that's JB on the left there, of course, and George Fell on the right-hand side there. George, from what I understand, was quite a pilot himself. I don't recall ever meeting him or knowing him. I want to say, I'm not certain I got the right pilot, but I think he's the one that eventually moved away from the area. I'm not sure where he went to. Maybe Rusty will text me and tell me where he went or what happened to him, but I seem to recall JB telling me today that at some point he left the area. Maybe went to Greensboro or another flight operations, I'm not sure. Okay, let's go ahead then, lead item number 14. I'm not sure, we think this is somewhere around 1972. I tried to zoom in on the plaque to read what was on it, and when I did, it got really, really blurry, really, really fuzzy, so there just wasn't enough clarity to read what was on the plaque, so we don't know what it said. But JB remembered when this happened, and the gentleman on the right is Jack Looper, and this was one of the local civic clubs. I'm not sure, it may have been, if you recall from a couple of weeks ago, we talked about there was an event out of the airport where they were giving rides in airplanes based on your weight. They would weigh you, and it was something like, I don't know, 2 cents a pound, maybe 20 cents a pound, but whatever. That's how they decided how much to charge. It was a fundraising operation. And so anyway, I think this might have been as part of that. And it may have been the local Lions Club maybe that was involved in that. But in any case, it was presented with an award here, and I seemed like I could make out on the plaque itself the year 1972, but that's all I could make out. So anyway, Rusty just texted me and said that George Fell actually was from Colorado. So maybe he went back to Colorado in later years. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, okay, Lee, let's move on. This picture here would have been sometime after the operations moved out to the new airport. That's the new terminal building there behind JB over his left shoulder. And so I'm not sure whose airplane that was. You know, JB flew for a number of people. He flew for a good while for Long Manufacturing over in Tarboro. Understand, I think it was 3 or 4 different type planes. Flew 2 prop planes, I think, and 2 jets. He also flew for Don Stallings Oil Company here locally. Don had 2 King Airs, and then later two jets himself. And so, you know, for someone who started out flying crop dusters, to actually to move along and fly the different types of aircraft that he ended up flying was pretty remarkable. It's got a little text from Russia here. It says that was Long Manufacturing's airplane, and that building over on the left-hand side, I guess, is the Hardy's original hangar building. But anyway, that was Long Manufacturing. I guess this is one of their 2 prop planes. And then, like I said, in later years, they had, I think, 1 or 2 jets. And JB piloted all those airplanes for Long Manufacturing for a number of years. And then, of course, like I said, he flew for Don Stallings quite a while, too. So, anyway, it's time for our next commercial break. Lee, bring it back to me. While we're taking a break here, I want to encourage you, if you've got any memories or anything that you want to share with us about anybody who worked at the airport, either the old one on Church Street or the new one out on Highway 97, give us a call. 407-1111 is the number. When we come back from the break, we'll take your calls. We'll look at some more pictures. We'll talk more about the old airport operations. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Wayback Wednesday.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service. We offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family. And we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
If you or your loved one is living with hearing loss, and if you haven't found a solution that fits your lifestyle, then you should consult with the local experts at the new Hearing Aid Urgent Care in Nashville, North Carolina. Hearing Aid Urgent Care is a place to go for over-the-counter hearing solutions that will improve your daily life and communication between your loved ones and you. Purchasing in our store does not require any prescription or medical recommendation. Our team of experts does recommend a hearing examination so we can help you purchase the correct product for your personal needs. We hold regular listen and learn events so you can ask questions and work with the high-quality products from our vendors to find out what hearing device will best suit you before you buy. Open Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And you can call 252-459-4008 to find out more information. Hearing Aid Urgent Care located at 102 West Nashville Drive in Nashville, North Carolina.
When faced with special care needs for elderly or disabled loved ones, families want compassionate, comforting care. That's Tender Touch Home Care Services' goal, providing the level of care we would expect for our own. With over 10 years of home care excellence, Tender Touch provides an array of services that keeps your loved one at home. From personal care, light housekeeping, errands, and meal preparation, to our private duty care program, which combines all of our home care offerings in one package.
Tender Touch Home Care Services, where your needs are our concern.
We're in our 18th year of practice at the Hammer Chiropractic Center, and we've seen over 15,000 different people in the Rocky Mount area. 40% of headaches actually come from a neck problem. Many patients come in taking multiple aspirin, over-the-counter medications and such a day, and we can get you to stop doing that and actually fix the problem so the headaches don't rise anymore. A lot of people think chiropractic hurts. It does not. Most of the people come in and they feel great when they leave.
We're back. If you're just tuning in, you're watching Wayback Wednesday. I'm Randy Adcox. Today, by the way, is June the 7th, 2023. So if you're watching us any other time, you're watching a replay. But we are live tonight. I welcome your calls. 407-1111 is the number. While I've been on the air with you, I've been texting back and forth with Rusty Williams. He's on watching the show at home and filling me in on some details about some of the pictures we're talking about here. I forgot to mention earlier, he actually sent me a text, and the story I told earlier about the pilot who flew too low was, let me get this call. I'll come back to him in a minute. Hello, caller, you on the air?
All right, you just had a picture on there not too long ago about Mr. Jack Looper. It was in a picture, and that man, Mr. Jack Looper, died in a single-engine plane crash that went into the Atlantic Ocean near Kitty Hawk Nag's Head or whatever. He was a CPA in Rocky Mount, so that didn't ever come out, but he was an active member of the Rocky Mount Lions Club, so I was just going to stick that in there for you.
I appreciate that, and you know, JB told me that story, and I forgot to mention it. He sure did.
All right.
Thank you, buddy.
Goodbye.
All right, goodbye. Yep, that's true. Item number 15, we showed earlier the picture where JB was awarded the plaque. That was the Lions Club, and as Eric just said, Jack Looper sadly passed away. From what that picture right there, you had a guy on the right's Jack Looper. From what I understand, from what JB told me, he took off in a heavy fog and got disoriented, ended up flying his airplane out over the ocean and either ran out of fuel or flew it into the ocean. I'm not sure exactly what happened. I'm not sure anyone knows, but that was in fact true. Jack Looper was a CPA here in Rocky Mount, and JB said he used to tease him. Sadly, he used to tease him and say, you know, you're the best accountant I know, but you're a sorry pilot, or a lousy pilot, something along those lines. But anyway, you know, it obviously flying an airplane can be a dangerous occupation. It doesn't have to be, but it certainly can be. There's so many things that can go wrong. And, you know, I remember during the very short time that I was taking flying lessons, one of the things that I remember being told is that, you know, if you're in an airplane and something goes wrong, you just can't pull over the side of the road and get out and check it out. And so, unfortunately, you know, problems that arise while you're thousands of feet above the ground can quickly deteriorate into a deadly situation. And unfortunately, there's been an awful lot of pilots here, right here locally, who passed away in accidents and mishaps and so forth. But anyway, Jack Looper. Okay, let's move on, Lee. Item number 17. You know, one of the things that JB told me today that he was obviously very proud of is that he taught all his kids how to fly. This picture was taken sometime in the 1970s, I'm guessing. That's his daughter Martha there on the right. And what he's doing there, for those that are not familiar with the tradition, when a young pilot first gets their first fly solo and becomes a solo pilot, the tradition is to cut off the shirt tail. I'm not sure why that is. I've never heard the full story on that of why that became a tradition, but it was something that I heard many, many years ago, and it's been a tradition for a long, long time to cut the shirt tail off the pilot once you solo. And that's what he's doing there. He's got either a pair of scissors, I guess, and cutting the shirt tail off his daughter's shirt because she had just soloed. And JB told me, he said that I'm not exactly sure who the pilot was, but we mentioned tragic airplane crashes and so forth. But shortly after, I guess, Martha got her pilot's license, someone else here locally, I don't know if it was Jack Looper or someone else, but apparently it was a plane crash, and I guess it spooked her. And he says she never really felt comfortable flying again after that. And so of all the kids that did learn to fly and eventually got their license, only one of them, my good friend Rusty here, who has been texting me in the background, continued flying and flew for many, many years. Recently retired. So anyway, let's move on, Lee. Item number 18. And this was this picture appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram December the 30th, 1971. Item number 8, go, Lee, 18. This is JB on the left and his son John. And of course, John, it says JB Williams left, manager of the Rocky Mount Airport, waxed off the shirt tail of his 16-year-old son John after John flew his solo flight. The shirt tail cutting ceremony is a tradition in aviation for new pilots upon completion of their solo flight. John almost grew up in an airplane. His dad has been flying for years and is a former commercial airlines pilot. So, as I said before, JB taught all his kids to fly. And in 1971, John got his pilot's license, or at least flew solo. Anyway, in this picture. Moving along, right along, item number 19, speaking of the devil, to use an old term, this is a picture in 1973 when Rusty got his pilot. How about that, Rusty? Now you're on TV. Smile pretty. He's holding his driver's license in the left hand and his pilot's license in the right-hand side. 1973, I'm saying 73, I'm guessing somewhere around 73. But in any case, Rusty flew for many, many years and still flies occasionally, I think, too. Flown for a couple of different airlines and worked very closely with his dad. And, you know, that to me would have been a great way to make a living, to be an airline pilot, or pilot in general for that one, not necessarily an airline pilot, but just to be able to fly. And they flew several trips together, he told me, he and his dad. And I asked JB, one of the questions I asked him last week, I said, were there ever any instances where you felt like you might not come out of a situation you were flying in? And at first he said, no, not really. And then Rusty reminded him about a flight they were in somewhere, and I guess they were in a mountainous area. And anyway, I guess they come out of a fog or a cloud bank or something. I forgot the detail. But anyway, all of a sudden, Rusty said, Dad, pull up. And so anyway, but you know, for someone that flew crop dusters, and I've always heard that that's some of the most dangerous flying you can do is crop dust, being a crop dust pilot. Because you're flying low and fast and very close to the ground. And I guess you got to have nerves of steel to do that kind of flight work, and JB certainly did. So, okay, let's move on then. Item number 20. We're not sure when this picture was taken, and JB couldn't identify these people here. That's him second from the left. But we're thinking this was sales reps from the Aero Commander Jet Company. It's a Aero Commander jet behind them there. And JB said he thinks these guys are sales reps or pilot reps, whatever, from the aircraft company. And so, you know, one of the neat things about working around airplanes, working around an airport and so forth, I remember when I worked out there, was to be able to see the different types of airplanes that routinely fly in and out of airports. What I found was that what I thought I knew about airplanes was really just a scratch of the scratch, to use an old saying. There's so many different manufacturers and so many different aircraft models within each manufacturer that it really became quite interesting to me to learn not only the different manufacturers. You know, everyone's heard of the Piper Cub and, you know, the Beechcraft and the Learjets and these different, models and manufacturers. But there were certainly a number of other manufacturers, and within each manufacturer there's a number of different airplane models. And so I remember vividly constantly being amazed at the different airplanes that would land out there at the Rocky Mount Wilson Airport when I worked out there. Anyway, let's move on, Lee. Item number 21. This picture we think was taken in 1977. And JB said he thinks it was now in Florida, where the Piper Aircraft Corporation is. And this is when the new Piper Tomahawks were released. And This was the plane that I actually took flying lessons in. Like I said, I didn't fly enough to get a license. I think I ended up with 10 or 12 hours before I had to stop. I just couldn't afford to keep flying. Back then, I think the plane rental was, I don't know, $50, $60 an hour, maybe somewhere along in there. And I guess the instructor would have been probably that much again. In my case, I was actually fortunate that the guy I worked with was teaching me to fly, and he was trying to build up hours, and so he was not going to charge me for his time. I just had to pay to rent on the airplane. But still, it was around, I don't know, $50, $60 an hour, I believe, something like that. But at that time, I had a very young child at home, and wasn't making much money, just couldn't afford to keep paying to rent the airplane and keep flying. But this is the very airplane that I got, like I say, 10 or 12 hours in, and loved it, loved every minute of it. But anyway, the Piper Tomahawk, I think there's still a bunch of those things flying around now. Okay, we don't have a date on this. There was this SEAA feature article. I think it's, we talked this today. I'm not sure. JB said he wasn't sure. He thinks SEAA stands for Southeastern Agriculture Aviation Organization, something to that effect. But item number 22, if you would, Lee, there was a feature story done about JB and air care. And it was just a really, really well done article. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I just want to read a little bit for you here. It starts off, says, J.B. Williams started flying at 14. His interest in aviation started long before then, however. He built and flew model airplanes since he was old enough to put them together. Born in Rocky Mount, North Carolina in 1928, J.B. Williams has lived there ever since. In 1949, he went to work for Rocky Mount Air Service as a crop duster pilot. Later, he spent 2 years as an airline pilot with Capital Airways. Then in 1960, he bought out an air spraying business, which evolved into his present companies, Air Care Incorporated and Air Ag Incorporated. The company he purchased was in a depressed state, and when he took over the management, he had only one PA-18 Super Cub. The business grew as he introduced innovations, and soon he had 5 Cubs, all used in crop dusting in the Rocky Mount area. And the article goes on, it talks about his various jobs at various companies around the area. And it's a really well done article. There's some really neat pictures here. That's JB in the upper right hand corner, and standing in front of, I think that's that same prop plane, turboprop, that belonged to the lawn manufacturer in Tarboro. Down below, there's one of the Cessna ag wagons, crop dusting airplanes. In the bottom right hand side there, that's actually Foy Pullen and Charlie Brown performing some kind of maintenance on an aircraft there. Item number 23, Lee, is actually page 2 of this same article. And up in the top there, that's JB and Rusty again. JB told me a neat story too. He said when Rusty was like 16 or 17 years old, he was ferrying airplanes from as far away as like Wichita, Kansas, I guess. And JB said he called out there and said, look, my son's a pilot. He's only 16, 17 years old, but he's been certified, got his license and all. Is it okay if he flies your plane? They said, sure, as long as he's been, signed off on and can fly the plane, he can fly it. So I guess Rusty would fly out on a commercial airline to wherever the plane was that needed to be picked up, and he would hop in it and fly it back here. And so the picture at the top, it says, JB with his younger son, Rusty, who seems intent upon following in his dad's footsteps. Indeed he did. Bottom left-hand corner, that's George Fell, who was at that time, and I'm not sure when this article came out. I'm guessing sometime in the 1970s. But anyway, at that time, George Fell was the chief pilot of Air Ag Inc. And it says during the off season, he was a salesman for Air Ag. And of course, that's JB on the right-hand side in the middle picture there. And then down below, that's Dickie Edwards. Some of you may know Dickie. Dickie worked in the parts department out at Air Care for many years, and later went to work for another company selling jets. And that's what he was doing up until he retired a few years back. Well, he was selling jets. So anyway, it's just neat how, being in the industry and being around the aircraft allowed these people to migrate into other fields of work. Okay, Lee, I think we're about to run out of time. There's one more thing I wanted to share. We're not going to have time to get all these done. This is a poem. I'm going to read it real quickly. Reminded me of a poem I read about some Vietnam veterans several years ago. It says, in memoriam, a flight instructor stood at the gate, his face so weary and cold. He meekly asked that man of fate admission to the fold. What have you done, St. Peter asked, to seek admission here? I've been a flight instructor down on earth for many a weary year. Those gates swung sharply open when Peter touched the bell. Come in, he cried, and draw your harp. You've had your share of hell. Okay, real quickly, Lee, I think we've got time for one or two more. 25 is a picture. There you go. That's Hardee's in the background there. And number 26 is the building everyone probably remembers now. This was, well, it was Hardee's at this time, but number 26 is actually when they remodeled Hardee's and added on about 3 floors to it. So in the picture you see there in the background, that's Hardee's when it was a one-story building. And this took place, this picture right here, in 1973 when Hardee's remodeled and added on 4 stories to their main building there. And of course, number 27, Lee, is the building we all recognize now as we ride by there. Now that the North Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles has got it, this is the DMV office, and it's radically different now, of course. And one more real quick before we go off the air. This is the postcard that Bill Dove gave me last week, and it is the old Lewis home, and this postcard dates back, we think, into the 1940s. Can you throw that, Lee, real quick before we sign off the air? There it is. Postcard of the old Lewis home, also known as Stonewall. Folks, that's going to do it for us tonight. We've run slam out of time. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank Rusty for his great information on some of the pictures tonight. Have a great week, folks. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to one another, and we'll see you next week with more Wayback Wednesday. Good night.